My guest today is going to clear 2,000 drafts this summer. He's the ultimate fantasy grinder. And this year, he's completely overhauled his process, how he's approaching drafts, thanks to some behind the scenes simulations, pushing him in completely new directions. Today, Sackreligious from Legendary Upside shares with me the biggest changes he's making in 2025 drafts to build better teams, along with his favorite player targets and stacks. And then we hop into BBM Draft. Let's get to it. Welcoming in Legendary Upside, Sackreligious. We did one of these draft style videos last year, one of the more popular videos on the feed, and we had to run it back this year. And a lot has changed, Sack, since we last did this. You guys have been working hard on the rankings, the sidekick, the sims that power them over at Leg Up. And so I'm going to ask you right off the rip, do you have any favorite structures this year or things that the sims are pushing you toward more than other?
Oh man, I feel like this changed so much between last year and this year. I feel like last year I knew a way to play. I knew, hey, if I play this way in best ball, I'm going to be able to draft good teams within like these confines. And outside of that, it's kind of scary. And I don't know if I can draft good teams in weirder structures I'm less familiar with. But this year, getting to do a ton of work with the sims, both behind the scenes and then also in the 1,500 or so drafts I've done so far, I've got a lot more experience drafting in structures that I would have been really uncomfortable in last year. And having the sims to help guide me has really helped me realize that the kind of common thread that I notice through most drafts is that the sims are really just telling you to play flexibly. And what I mean by that is, number one, they're racing to fill your flex position pretty often. And historically, I feel like we would have said, oh, you're going to try and win the flex with wide receiver because you need more of them anyway. You want your, fourth wide receiver, a fifth wide receiver to still be really strong. And that's how you're going to fill the flex. But the sims really helped illuminate to me, it's more about what your room gives you and steering into that in each draft and filling your flex with the best values you can take that are flex players. And so that doesn't mean you're always punting quarterback either. There's lots of times you'll take an elite quarterback. It's just if your room is gobbling up wide receivers early and they're continuously giving you really good running back values, you might end up just slamming 3, 4, even 5 early running backs because that's the thing that's going to give you the largest advantage at the flex over not only the people in your room, but the rest of the field. And so just being comfortable in those weird structures. And oftentimes I'll get, something more traditional that looks like a 0 RB team or something that'd be more comfortable with, a hero RB or, double hero RB or whatever people are calling it these days. But you'll also see stuff like, hey, you took Brock Bowers in the mid-second and Trey McBride is all the way back here in the third. Yeah, he's going to score more points straight up than a lot of the wide receivers that go here. So he's just a better flex play than some of these guys. If you think through Trey McBride versus Marvin Harrison and you're on the clock picking between both of them, are you confident that Marvin Harrison's going to score more points than Trey McBride this year? What about Trey McBride, Devontae Adams? And it kind of progresses as you go through that third round. A lot of those receivers might not outscore Trey McBride. And so you end up with these roster constructions that feel a little less conventional, but really it's just leaning into what is available in each room and trying to have a lot of different tools in the tool belt and know how to execute the different strategies that are good in the different situations.
It's funny as you describe that, it took me back to thinking how Sean Siegel described like 0 RB very early on, where he was like, if you're just drafting a running back at the end of the round, you're essentially drafting a watered down version of the people who got the really good running backs early. And it's like, no, the room is pushing you to grab the better player here, even if it was a structure, which at the time was very uncomfortable to take wide receivers early in drafts. And it seems like that same kind of concept writ large of just, we all have these comfy structures. We kind of know on a limited sample size, like if you have 4 wide receivers through round 7, like that has historically been good, but really being adaptable to your room and the best players that it is giving you, which is hard for us who like to pattern match and do similar things over and over.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like not getting so comfortable that hey, we've seen 5 slates of data. Clearly, that all the answers we could possibly know are captured in those 5 slates of data. Imagine someone doing that for DFS. We're through 5 weeks, and it's the very first season ever of NFL DFS. You're through 5 weeks of the first season ever of NFL DFS, and people declare, well, the game is all but solved. We've got enough data now through 5 weeks to know exactly what we should be doing. You never play tight end in the flex. You always play 3 running backs, right? Jam the workhorse running backs in. You punt wide receiver. It's easy. DFS is solved. And we found out over a larger time horizon that no, that's not the case. There's lots of different ways you can play. And with the advent of Sims and DFS, I feel like it taught a lot of the same lessons, and that it's about being flexible in what the slate is giving you. There are some slates where it's really good to play tight end in the flex. There's other slates where you're going to play a running back in the flex because there's a really underpriced guy there. And then there's other slates where, hey, you're just going to jam 4 wide receivers in because a lot of the times they're just going to score the most points. But it's just that being able to diagnose each spot independently and try and be flexible with your strategy, I think, is the most important thing.
And we're going to hop into draft in a second after we finish this questionnaire, and we'll get to kind of explore some of those dynamics when we are on the clock and see what a room is doing. But let's get to, some of the lower hanging fruit, the fun stuff people always want to know. What's your favorite player target? And I'll go ahead and lump it in because I got a little preview of this with your favorite stack, because I think they're one and the same here.
Yeah, so my favorite target is, he's already starting to scream up boards, so I'm not even able to get him as much as I used to be, but George Pickens was a player where, with the leg up rankings team, we're talking every single day and making adjustments. And he was one where I'd been pounding the table for him for months, saying, I really don't see the difference very much between, say, him and like a T. Higgins or a lot of the wide receivers that go in round 3. There's really not very much competition there besides the alpha receiver. Just like you have with Higgins, it's Chase, and then with Pickens, it's Lamb. And so you've got this alpha that's there, and then you have an extremely talented guy that's downfield, good contested catch receiver. And for Pickens, the nice thing that we have going for him is we've only seen him play with pretty terrible quarterback play and terrible situations. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if Pickens runs 100 more routes this year than he's ever run in his NFL career. And if you look at his historical games, I want to say that 15 of the games he's played have been with Kenny Pickett as his quarterback, who is currently in a 4-way quarterback battle to start for the Cleveland Browns and sounds like is losing to Joe Flacco. So that's not a glowing review of the quarterback play that George Pickens has had this far. So I just think there's a lot of volatility here with it, where we think this is a really talented player. He's coming into a situation that should be a lot better just from an overall offensive environment. Add to that he should get more opportunity because you're just going to have more pass attempts as well in this better offense. And he's going to play with the best quarterback play he's ever had. By the way, the healthy Dak seasons, he basically in the last 3 healthy seasons, he doesn't really ever throw for under 4,500 yards and 30 touchdowns. If you go back and look, that's kind of like a floor for him. And so as long as you get a healthy season out of him, I think Pickens is really set up to pay off more of a 3rd round wide receiver tag, and he's going at the 4-5 turn. And so he was just such a smash for so long for me. Now he goes in the mid 4th, and sometimes I've seen him in the early 4th. So I'll probably have trouble getting him, but he's one of my largest stands so far.
And then as far as stacking him up with Dak, I think it's kind of an interesting conversation because you're always fighting over him with the CeeDee Lamb drafter. And depending on, where Lamb goes, if you have him boxed in, then you can kind of have first dibs at a good price. But other times you would essentially have to pull him up, to what? If you're at the 1-2 turn, or sorry, the 4-5 turn, you're having to grab Dak at 97 or 98. So how are you approaching stacking Dak with Pickens?
Yeah, and I think that price of 97, 98 is pretty fair for Dak. That's, the quarterbacks that go in that tier, like Bo Nix or Brock Purdy or Justin Fields, guys like that. I think it's pretty reasonable to have Dak there, and that's about where we have him priced relative to his range of outcomes. So it doesn't seem too unreasonable to me to take him there. Sometimes I will, But the nice thing about the sidekick is it's diversifying it for me. So there will be times where I'm going to reach on Dak there. That's usually going to happen when the opportunity cost is low. Hey, all the other players I like that are good targets around this range that would be in the, late 90s, early hundreds, they're all off the board. People took all my favorite guys. So I'll just take Dak here. And other times when there's a really good pick that I like, there's a Jordan Mason or a Jalen Warren or Jaden Higgins or what have you, and those guys are on the board, and it's like, well, we'll push Dak, and if we get him back, awesome. We think this is a huge value, and we have him stacked with Pickens. And, if we don't get him back, that's okay. I don't want 100% of my George Pickens teams to have Dak. And that's something where I think I was making mistakes last year where I was leaning too heavily into, oh my gosh, I have this player. I really want to stack him up with the quarterback. Yeah. And you end up over-correlated. And it's not to say that you're overvaluing the correlation. It's just that from a diversification standpoint, you're so tightly tying together that these outcomes have to be good together for this team to be successful. And I think there are lots of outcomes where Dak is healthy, he has a good season, but just because of the randomness of the pod structure where you need like the sequence of fantasy points being scored to be right for your teams to advance. And so there could be seasons where Dak smashes, has a bad week 15, and that's enough to tank a bunch of your Pickens teams. I want to be able to have a broad enough exposure in my portfolio to where in the event that outcomes like that happen, where Dak just isn't as favorable to have with Pickens, I have other ways to get there with this pick that I think is so grossly mispriced.
All right. How about a favorite gal brain idea? And curious if this arose from working on the Sims, or is this more of an IKB that you've landed on?
So the cool thing about the Sims is there are lots of times where they kind of show us principles or things that we thought were good ideas or things that people have talked about before. There's lots of stuff that is relatively new and undiscovered and we're learning about for the first time with them. But one of the things that it kind of confirmed for me, and Sean Siegel is like early on so much stuff. When we're looking at what the Sims are telling us, there's so many times where I'm like, oh yeah, it's kind of what Sean was doing, all those years ago. And so one thing that Sean would often do, and I feel like people would give him grief for it, is he would reach like a round, 2 rounds, sometimes even for his player targets. And his justification often, I remember very clearly hearing him talk about Brock Bowers and Jaden Daniels this way last year. He'd say, I want to reach for these guys because they go in the same point of the draft. And if I don't reach for one of them early, the chances of me getting both of them are substantially diminished. And I think they're both mispriced. These are both targets that I want on this team. I already think that the opportunity cost of this pick, where I'm considering reaching on them, I already think they're better players than this pick. And so for me, it's not worth squeezing that extra little, couple cents of value out, getting a player that the market has priced here and hoping that the 2 best picks that I think are on the board are available all the way when it gets back to me. I'd rather just take the best players now. And I think that I'm confident enough in my player evaluations, where I have such a big gap that even if I'm wrong a little bit, it's such a large gap anyway that I've got room for error and I still can be right on this. So the whole concept of reaching a couple rounds for your player targets, especially when the areas of the draft are either flat or have what you think are lots of bad picks. For example, I feel like this happens with a lot of the wide receivers that we're going in like round 11, round 12 area or so, where you've got like Marvin Mims and Hollywood Brown, Keon Coleman, Rashad Bateman, stuff like that, where they're just a little overpriced. Not saying that they're even bad players. It's just that the difference between them and like a Wan'Dale Robinson or a Demario Douglas or a Romeo Doubs is basically nothing. Like they'll score the same fantasy points as those guys. They'll have the same distribution for their weekly scores, their range of outcomes. They're going to hit things, at certain fantasy point thresholds at very similar frequencies. The only difference is you take one of them like 3, 4, 5 rounds earlier than the other guys. And so again, it's changing your framing of like, this isn't a bad player. This player's fine. It's just that the market has priced them in a way that's not congruous with the way it's priced other similar players. And that's kind of the whole game. Like you're just trying to find these inefficiencies in the market and exploit it. And so taking advantage of flat spots or dead spots in the draft like that and using them if you do have player targets that go near each other in ADP or that are all kind of clumped together, using that as license to say, this is a good spot to pull this guy up. So that's kind of the Galbrain idea.
Yeah, I like that. I did the draft with Jacob Sanderson on the channel last video, and we had the idea of just essentially like skipping the third round was his Galbrain idea. The same thing. It's like, hey, I like the players in the fourth round. Let's do it. So I like that through line there. And what about to wrap up your favorite late round flyer here? You got anything special for us?
Oh, I mean, we're right at the time of the season where this is going to change basically. I mean, if not week by week, like day by day, because we're getting so much camp news. But earlier in the off season, I feel like my approach was to really want to lean into players where I just thought the market was not pricing them correctly, because the large portion of their range of outcomes was going to hit. They had very wide paths to hit and pay off, not as much leaning into just the raw upside where this guy misses 98% of the time, but the 2% of the time, oh my gosh, it's a smash. And so right now we're just on the edge of starting to get some of these late round guys that I'm going to be more comfortable leaning into. Hey, this guy misses 80% of the time, but 20% of the time he's a smash. I like those odds a lot better than 98.2, but my favorite target right now is a guy that's more along the lines of, he hits so often, his ceiling is capped. We already know what he is. He's an old, dusty player, but he just shouldn't be priced in the 18th round. And so it's an easy way to stack a win on your team, and that's Josh Reynolds. He's like the very clear wide receiver 2 for the Jets right now. And if you look historically at Josh Reynolds, like, he's had the ability to pay this pick off very, very easily. He's got a number of games over 15 half PPR points. He's got games in the 20s. It's very squarely in his range of outcomes to do that. And if you get a 20-point game from your 18th round pick, that's a smash. Like, you just need one of those at the right time, and you're really, really happy with that pick.
All right, we will, we'll revisit that in the 18th round of this draft, which we are off to the races in a Best Ball Mania. We got the 1-6, which is kind of a nice spot to be in here as far as giving us time to read the room and talk through some decisions. Barkley falls to 1-6. Anything you would do here other than Barkley? Yeah,
I'd just take Barkley here. I didn't take very much of him when he was going at the 1-2. And so now I've been getting him at like 1-6, 1-7 often. And so that feels great. I had a pretty big fade, and now I'm coming up closer to neutral on him. And I really like how that's shaken out so far.
Yeah, those are the perfect times when it kind of works in that way, where I was the same here. I had just started to pull in my BBM exposures for just BBM specifically, and I was at 3.7% Barkley. And now to inch up closer to the field at better prices and getting Barkley paired with, someone asked me earlier today my favorite draft slot, and I said 6 because I love those top 19 players. So now we're going to get Barkley paired with a guy like Bowers, Ladd, or AJ Brown that you're normally not getting him paired with, which is pretty fun.
Yeah, exactly. And I couldn't agree more. That's the tier break right there. The Bowers, AJ Brown, and Ladd. I do like the running backs that go right after that as well. Yeah. But it's something where I probably prefer getting those after that tier of these receivers and Bowers that go here in the early to mid second round.
I mean, it won't even be an issue for this spot, but like in other spots, when you get a big ADP faller early, do you like the idea of trying to scoop up the next best ADP value that's available, knowing that those two are going to be pretty rare? Or do you still want to be kind of very player target and rankings specific when you're making that next selection?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a mix of both. If it's a player that I think is reasonably priced, I'm certainly willing to do it. If it's someone that I think is a bad pick, it doesn't really matter to me that I'm getting an ADP value. Just to take it to like an extreme thought experiment, pretend that you knew for certain that a player was out for the season, but you're the only person in the world that knows, right? You were there watching the training camp happen and everyone else didn't see it, and this guy's out for the season, but he's fallen 6 spots and no one in the room knows it. You still wouldn't take him. Like, no, I'm not going to take this guy that's out for the season just because it's a unique combo. And so obviously we don't have as much confidence as that scenario, but still that's kind of how I would frame it.
For sure. Yeah. The perceived ADP value versus rankings value. So Bowers does go. That leaves Ladd here. Interesting. The sidekick pushes Bucky up. Are we gonna IKB it or go Ladd?
Oh gosh, I really like them both. Let's put Ladd in the queue right now. Yeah, Bucky has been someone we've been talking about a lot in the rankings chat. We're pretty high on him. I do just want to take Ladd here, though, to give us that little bit of additional flexibility. We could take Bucky, but these third-round receivers I don't really like very much. And so I would anticipate that we end up not being in a situation where, we leave ourselves flexible and open if we take Bucky, because I think the third round will probably end up taking a quarterback or Trey McBride with how the draft falls often. So.
And I like, kind of what we just started out talking about Barkley at 6 is like, I definitely have a decent amount of Barkley Bucky teams, but Barkley Ladd is so much harder to get, just because even Bowers, will slide in specific rooms where people are anti tight end or whatever, but Ladd doesn't often slide to get paired with Barkley at a high frequency.
Yeah, and I mean, especially early in the contest, right, where you were getting Barkley going at the 1-2, Ladd was never making it there. So you probably have a solid 20-30% of the contest where that combo is exceedingly rare. Now it's just, modestly rare, but yeah, it's definitely attainable, but it's a fun one to grab.
All right, we're about to pick at 3-6. We start Barkley and Ladd here. Trey McBride sliding a smidge. Then you got those wide receivers. Then you're down to kind of Bric, Kyron, Hampton. What is your lean here? McBride comes off the board.
Oh, would have loved Trey McBride. I'm pretty into Garrett Wilson, though, here. The other one that I would consider is JSN. He's one where I disagree with the rankings team assessment on him. But let's do Garrett Wilson. He's a fun one, and I do like having Justin Fields as a quarterback stacking partner. So,
and the real reason, in the same way Pat drafts, Trevion Henderson to set up Drake May, we're gonna draft Garrett Wilson to set up Justin Fields, who is actually to set up Josh Reynolds as our 18th round.
Yeah, there you go. We're thinking 5 steps ahead.
So this will actually be an interesting thing to talk through at 43, because we are kind of getting closer to where like you actually have to take Pickens to get him there. I'm curious your kind of like break-even point on Pickens being a smash for you after he was kind of anchored to the 4-5 turn.
Yeah, I'd probably just take him at 43. The only one that is like a close call, if George Kittle miraculously makes it to us, we're just immediately sprinting to the podium for George Kittle. The other one that I'd consider, which I did not draft a ton of earlier, is Xavier Worthy. Yeah. I really thought that, when we were fairly confident that Rice was not getting suspended this year, he's fully healthy. Like, I saw the Xavier Worthy bet as extremely fragile. Like, you really might just be getting fancy Rashid Shaheed. But now I think that with the Rice suspension seeming pretty imminent, it really opens the door for Worthy to establish himself a little further. And I think that is just such a massive fundamental change in his profile for this year that I'm trying to correct the fact that I was a little underweight Worthy earlier. So him and Pickens are my two like biggest priorities that you could reasonably get here. And then, a big faller like George Kittle, who used to go here. He used to go in the 5th.
Oh, yes, he did. Yeah, that it was like there kept being like these dings on every Niners wide receiver, while simultaneously every analyst was like, George Kittle's undervalued, George Kittle. And then it was like you blinked and he had rose a round and a half in ADP. So yeah, we are about to be on the clock here. I mean, if we got this tier flat, I like getting our green check marks on your questionnaire if you want to grab George Pickens here. Yeah,
gosh, the Terry McLaurin slide is actually pretty fun.
We can do it.
No, we're going to do Pickens.
Let's do it.
But yeah, I think the Terry McLaurin slide is not super reasonable. Like, I don't really think there's any reason for him to not play. Like, he's just honestly, it's also insane for Washington to not get. Washington has the money to do it. It's a little weird. Also, Washington's basically entire roster, like all their starters, are very old. So they're going to hit like this strange period as far as like a roster construction standpoint where they're going to need to do like a soft reset in a year. Even like next year might be a soft reset for the Commanders, which is wild to think about with Jaden Daniels as their quarterback and how good he looks. But if you go look at the age of the starting 22 players on offense and defense for the Washington Commanders and like who's under contract for next year, you will be surprised. This team's going to look extremely different next year. And so I understand like maybe they're spooked about that. And they're like, gosh, we really don't want to extend Terry because then we're so old. It's like, guys, you're going to be pretty bereft of talent next year. I think that it just makes sense to extend Terry, especially with the fact that like you're bringing in Debo and you're paying him and you've got this like player that's been with your organization the whole time and has done nothing but, be a good soldier and produce for you. Like, to me, it's like maybe giving him the contract isn't even like the most efficient allocation of resources, but the bad vibes you're getting from not taking care of your players, I think outweighs it. Chuba's a super duper smash here for us. I think that's a great pick. The other one that I'd be interested in is Zay Flowers, but I think Chuba's a really, really good pick for us here.
Yeah, we take Chuba to pair with Barkley. Talk about Chuba. I think he's interesting in that he would typically be the kind of dead zone-y back people would get spooked by, not the, high pedigree. Is it just a projectable volume thing? They bring in Rico, they draft Trevor Etienne. But he is kind of an oasis here as far as, or not the word I'm looking for here, but there's not too many running backs that you feel comfortable with in the 5th round right now. So is he just kind of stand out from the rest of the available options?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Chuba compared to the next running backs that are going to be available, like hypothetically, say we could get Travion Henderson or RJ Harvey to fall back to us in the 6th round. It's like, okay, those are great picks. I love those. But Chuba should project much better than those players right out of the gate. Those players' ceilings are a little higher than Chuba's, but Chuba's ceiling is very high. I mean, last year we saw Chuba was a bona fide RB1. Like in past years, Chuba would be going in the 3rd round. So him going in the 5th, and I think people are just, it's really hard for people to wrap their brains around like, what is the dead zone? What isn't the dead zone? And it comes down to like, you need to be able to price every player independently and price them relative to each other. Like trying to come up with these arbitrary or artificial classifications of like, this is where the dead zone is, so anyone going in these rounds is bad. Like that's a recipe for failure. Like you're going to set yourself up to fade really good picks and draft really bad picks if you're making sweeping generalizations like that. So it's really important to be able to independently evaluate each player relative to the ones that go around them.
All right, on the clock here, RJ Harvey falls to pick 67. Is he our guy?
Yeah, I don't think we need to talk even that much about that. That's a great pick. Very happy with that. You get a very, very strong run game. J.K. Dobbins being there is definitely a little worse for RJ Harvey's early season outlook. I certainly think Dobbins is going to get some work. I like him a lot as a pick as well. But I just think the ceiling for Harvey is so high. If Harvey manages to get even 80% of the Javonte Williams workload from last year, like he destroys this price. It's like, so yeah. The only thing that really I think is there's a couple paths to like RJ Harvey being a bad pick. A bad pick by results, not by process, where you're thinking through the entire range of outcomes. But bad pick by results would be RJ Harvey stinks, which is certainly in the range of outcomes. That can happen. Guys are allowed to not be good. Also, the Broncos not being as healthy as they were last year. The Broncos ran so pure on injury luck last year. If you look at their offensive line and how many games they missed relative to like what the rest of the league missed, the Broncos just were sun running health. So if that changes, you also could see that as a reason for Harvey not being quite as good a pick in a results-wise way.
And we're back on the clock. Jacoby goes. Montgomery here at the top. Godwin, Shakir, Igbuka. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Montgomery's pretty good here. I think the way that the room is kind of pushing us is we're going to have a receiver that we really like in the next round. Just my familiarity with the range of guys and where they go. And these running backs, if you told me like beyond a shadow of a doubt, Tony Pollard will be there in the 8th round, I would say, okay, then we pass on David Montgomery and we take Tony Pollard in the next round, because I don't think they're so different. Montgomery's got a better team, better offensive line, but he's got substantially more competition. And then Pollard, you should have better workload, but in a worse situation, right? But I don't think really, as far as like a fantasy outlook, that they're all that different. You get the huge contingent upside on David Montgomery as well, if anything were to happen at Gibbs. But I don't know for certain that Pollard's going to come back at 91. In fact, I would assume that he's not going to come back at 91. And so because of that, I'd rather take David Montgomery here, because I think there's lots of receivers that could be available in this next round that I like, especially with how people have been letting Chris Godwin fall. There's a couple others too, where, if we get like a Jaden Higgins, or if we get, we don't even have to take Brandon Ayuk for another couple rounds, but I feel like people are kind of double counting stuff that we had already modeled for him. We already had him missing, a good chunk of the season. We didn't have him starting to play, for well into a month. And we also had his production being pretty slow to start, just as he's coming off the injury. And so you get people double counting the pup news, which is something we already assumed. And I think that, Ayuk's a pretty good smash at his price too. So we won't need to take him here. But I would assume that we'll have a wide receiver that we like. Although seeing Igbuka, Downs, Godwin, and Higgins go isn't great for that.
Yeah, and this will be and I would say this kind of dovetails with racing to win the flex, where generally you would get afraid of having 4 running backs that early, only 3 wide receivers, but really letting the room come to you and not forcing it. And now we kind of have that interesting thing. Do we pull up Fields here, or do we just grab Michael Pittman as the ADP wide receiver guy?
Oh, man. Let's see. I think we can let's do Pittman, because sometimes I can get Fields to come back, and I think there's a decent chance. Fields, if you see, Fields has a 61% probability of making it back to us there. Yep. And so that's a spot where I'm willing to IKB the sidekick a little bit. And that's why we added that probability in there, to give you a little bit more information to be able to decide, hey, 61%, I like those odds. And if I miss, what's the worst thing that happens? I end up with a Dak Prescott and Justin Herbert stacked up with their 2 receivers. I feel pretty good about that. So
yeah, and the other thing, it's hard, right, in a 20-second room to have all the time to do it. But then we can pull up this side of the board. 3 of the drafters behind us took an elite quarterback, or at least one in round 4. And Joe Burrow here, Lamar Jackson, Allen. So it would really, it's probably unlikely one of them grabs an unstacked Justin Fields. They're not that unstacked Justin Fields is bad, but yeah, if you're going to kind of try to play the probabilities, this seems like a time, use that probability tool, review the room, and make kind of a push decision there.
Yeah, exactly. Man, Brandon Ayuk goes at 94. That's kind of a bummer. When we take Michael Pittman, we can't really get, and this kind of goes back to hey, sometimes you need to reach rounds to get your guys. Like, there wasn't an outcome where we get Michael Pittman, Justin Fields, Brandon Ayuk, and Dak Prescott, right? It's not possible really, unless something crazy happens where people are letting them fall a bunch, or we're reaching way ahead for those guys. So this is one where I will just IKB the rankings team, though, because I think that we are a little too hot on Travis Kelce after the potential Rashee Rice suspension. Oh, I didn't even need to IKB the sidekick.
It heard you.
Yeah, it was like, don't worry, I got you. Here's your Justin Fields. So we get one of those outcomes that fall into the 62% of the time. Feels good to be on that side of it.
Yep. And so our team now, we have Justin Fields at quarterback, Barkley, Chuba, RJ Harvey, and Montgomery at running back, Ladd, Garrett Wilson, George Pickens, Michael Pittman at wide receiver. So get that stack with Fields there, and in pretty good shape, I would say, as far as, executing our draft plan so far.
Yeah, I feel pretty happy about it. We'll see if Dak makes it back to us at 115. There's some other good picks I like here. I've got an enormous bag of Luther Burden.
Yeah.
Just, by the way, he's practicing today for the first time in training camp. So that's
we're recording this on Monday the 28th, and that was music to all of our ears.
Yeah, I can't wait for when this actually airs. Luther Burden to have re-aggravated his hamstring, and I'm just mourning for all my bags. But yeah, feeling good about getting a huge bag of Burden. He really feels like kind of a relic of, days past where people would let wide receiver prospects of that talent fall to where he has in best ball drafts. So we'll see how it actually shakes out this year. I think there's a lot of outcomes where Luther Burden doesn't do anything for fantasy.
Yeah.
But I think the outcomes where he does stuff for fantasy, he might just be really fun.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, luckily the market has been pretty spooked lately, so you can get really incredible prices on him. And yeah, you mentioned the guy, the bygone era. It was Garrett Wilson. Like he was the one who used to always be like, drafted top half of the first round of the NFL draft, but because it was the Jets, no one wanted to deal with it. And he was an uber smash at his ADP. All right, let's see what we're cooking here. Kelsey does go finally at 112, and lo and behold, Luther Burden up to the top of the sidekick here at 10-7. Bateman also kicking around.
I want this guy in front of us to snipe us on one of Dak or Burden, because I don't want to have to choose.
There you go.
What a guy. What a guy. Yeah, so Luther Burden here.
I believe, I'm going to guess that was the CeeDee Lamb drafter. Has to be, right? Yeah. No, it wasn't. Wow. Unstacked Dak in the CeeDee drafter was praying for it, I'm sure, as well. So there you go.
I honestly don't even think Unstacked Dak is bad there. You can backstack him with Jake Ferguson. You can backstack him with Miles Sanders. And another thing that I feel like I've learned more from The Sims is it is okay to sometimes end up with your quarterback unstacked. It's not like you're entering the draft and saying, oh boy, this is a good one to have an unstacked quarterback in. You're taking the guy that's going to add the most expected value to your team at each pick. And there are lots of times where, hey, Dak at 114, I said we thought he's pretty reasonably priced at the beginning of the 9th round. And so you're getting a good discount relative to what we think his value is. Like Caleb Williams, Baker Mayfield, Brock Purdy, Bo Nix, Justin Fields, even Kyler Murray. Like, I don't think it's unreasonable at all to say Dak could score in line with those guys or even outscore them. He has historically. So just getting that huge value and then saying, I'm going to stack this up later. And if I don't, it's not the end of the world. I got a player that scores more fantasy points than I should be allowed to draft here. So it's going to be okay.
And not to mention, even though, as part of our questionnaire, and always nice to get those green checks. I mean, Justin Herbert with Ladd here at 126 is just an awesome stacking partner as well.
I do. I really like Justin.
Oh, wow. I talked
my
about
heart.
it, dude.
That's okay. I like all these quarterbacks in this window. I'm totally fine with Jordan Love. And this is a guy where I'll gladly backstack him. Now, is Kraft already off the board?
He is.
Okay. Well, that's fine, because one of my favorite picks, Romeo Doubs, is certainly not off the board. So we can still get someone there. But yeah, I mean, this whole quarterback window, like Dak, Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, like all of those guys, Drake May would have been great picks for this team. I mean, shoot, if Caleb had fallen to us, like we probably would have taken Caleb. I'm like a little lower on Caleb than our rankings team is, but I still probably would have taken him if he had come to us at 115. And, Jared Goff, I would have taken at 126 if, he came back, because we have David Montgomery, and I like that bet on the offense. So there's just, all these quarterbacks are pretty good bets. And the Sims have really helped me be a little bit more flexible about like, hey, you don't have this guy stacked yet. You can always try and backstack him. And if you miss, it's still going to give you a better team than if you had been so dogmatic about like, I can't take this better scoring quarterback earlier because he's not stacked. I must wait for this much worse player later because he's stacked. Like, that doesn't make a ton of sense,
For sure. And it's funny because even in the dailies, the sim data for the Underdog dailies, the weekly, Jordan Love was actually one that would pop up a decent amount unstacked. And granted, that's a completely different format, but part of it was because they spread it out so much among the pass catchers that the benefits of hitting on the stack wouldn't give you a score that would be needed to be in the optimal anyways. So even sometimes on those, it's like, it isn't the worst thing in the world. And the sims have definitely helped me with that as well.
Okay, this is one where we are, right before we started recording this, we are literally making changes to this player right now in the sidekick. So I'm going to IKB off Dalton Kincaid, who's dealing with a knee injury right now, and IKB on to Jake Ferguson.
Yep. Yeah, I saw that as well. That's a very good shout here. And we also pair Ferguson with Pickens. Will you talk a little bit about that? That's one I like doing these. I call them phantom stacks, where you have the pass catchers without the quarterback. A lot of people don't like the idea of taking multiple pass catchers without the quarterback. What have you learned from the sims with those kind of teammate correlations?
Man, I kind of want people to keep not doing it if they're not doing it, because it's a really big edge. So teammates have extremely strong correlation over the course of an NFL season. I mean, just if you think logically through, right now we have look-ahead lines. Those look-ahead lines can't possibly be accurate for these teams, right? They're just the best guess right now. But so much stuff changes over the course of an NFL season. There are times where, for example, with the Bears last year, at the start of the season, people were so bullish. Oh my gosh, Caleb Williams, #1 overall pick. He's got Keenan Allen. He's got DJ Moore. He's got top 10 pick Rome Odunze. They've got Cole Kmet. Holy cow, this team is going to be incredible. And you get 8 weeks into the season and it's like, okay, maybe the Bears aren't going to score that many points. And all of a sudden, all those team totals that you have back in July or August, those look so silly compared to the new totals that you're seeing. And those events are correlated. They're correlated because it's how good is this team? How many points are they actually scoring? And so getting these correlated teammates over the course of a season is a really easy way to get guys that outperform their ADP. I mean, if you're saying, just think of it like this. There's a universe where the Cowboys throw 25 passing touchdowns, and there's a universe where they throw 40 passing touchdowns. If you get the 40 passing touchdown universe, Pickens and Ferguson are probably pretty mispriced, both of them. And so you're stacking that bet. Oh God, it's time for me to take my medicine. No, listen, I need to repent. So we're gonna Q tank Bigsby here. Okay. He is regrettably a pretty good pick right now. Wow. I don't think he's very good as a player for fantasy. I think he was middling at best, but he's getting opportunity with the ones. It looks like ETN is the one that's going the way of the old dusted. And you do have the Tootin small hamstring aggravation today that happened. It sounds like it's pretty minor. When they asked Liam Cohen about it, how long, is this going to be something that keeps him out for a long time? His answer, and I quote, was no. So I don't think it's very major. But the way that I'm interpreting this backfield now as we get more information is it really looks like Bigsby is going to be the one to lead them in carries to start the season. I do like that a lot for Tootin because it probably just means ETN's totally dust if Bigsby is beating him out right now. Because I don't think Bigsby is particularly good. I think he's probably like a replacement level runner in the league, and that a lot of his metrics were a little overinflated last year because he got to play the Colts basically the week right after they lost two of their best defensive players to injury, and they had a couple other, aside from their best players, they had a couple other linebacker injuries. The guy racked up 11 forced missed tackles with 7 of them coming on one carry against the Colts. And if you haven't watched that carry, you can go back and watch it. And it's comical. There's 2 guys that literally fall down untouched. They run past Tank Bigsby by themselves. He does nothing. They fall down. There's a bunch of disgusting arm tackles. He does make a sick stiff arm to break the last tackle though. So I don't want to come across as this totally biased Tank Bigsby hater. He does do one good thing on that run, and he puts a 6 stiff arm on a guy. But the 5 previous tackles that are counted as forced missed tackles are not really anything terribly special. I think Zeke Elliott forces those missed tackles too.
Well, it was a tough spot because we had Dylan Sampson, who generally goes higher than this, was available. Dobbs, who made sense for our Jordan Love, was available. So it's again one of those ranges where you wish you had 2 picks to make there. But we grab Tank, we lose out on Romeo Dobbs, and it looks like the sidekick likes us grabbing either a third quarterback or going tight end here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that the tight ends are going to be available later. If you look at oh my gosh, sniped on Bryce. Yeah.
That would have been a nice fall.
Well, then I think we just go ahead and do Zach Ertz here. He's the best pick by the sidekick. And even though it's a little bit of a reach by ADP for him, it's not that big of a reach. And we're going to need a couple tight ends anyway. So I'm fine just taking him here. If Bryce had been there, we would have done Bryce easily.
Yeah, Bryce is the third quarterback at that value. And again, another guy with plenty of backdoor stacking partners would have been very nice there. So yeah, it gets really tough when you have different team needs there. Like, do you think in hindsight, with even setting aside your personal history with Tank Bigsby, do you think structurally something else would have made sense, or do you think just he's now represents such a strong value there that it's worth it?
No, he's a pretty good value there. I just want to take the best player at each pick. And the only time I'm not going to take what I think is the best player at each pick is if there's a really high probability that I can take that exact same player later. And that I'm not like filling up a spot where it's like, okay, you're all full. You can't take any more of this position.
All right, we're back on the clock here in 1 second, and we're definitely swinging back over to wide receivers here. You and me both love Jalen Noel, as does the sidekick. There's also Wan'Dale Robinson, Jack Besh. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm leaning Wan'Dale. I'm also into Demario Douglas. Would you scroll down just a bit on the sidekick? I want to see if he's right below Besh. Oh, okay, he's a little lower. So yeah, we can just do Wan'Dale here.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was wondering if Douglas would get popped up just with our Jets as like a bring back there in week 17.
Yeah, I mean, it does all come down to the sim subsets that we have. So we might have just gotten a low run for Demario Douglas. This is a set of seasons where he doesn't do quite as good. Even though normally we would see him like in the 160s. So that's kind of interesting, but it does help with diversification, so you don't end up with 90% Demario Douglas.
Well, and that's what you were talking about too. That definitely resonates of like over correlating. Not that the correlation is bad, but do you want every one of your Justin Fields teams to have Pop Douglas as the week 17 bring back? Which in our head that feels comfy. It's the sexiest click to make there, but like you said, from a diversity standpoint, you want to be mixing and matching those bets because none of us are that confident on a 15th round pick being the guy you need in week 17.
Yeah, and I got plenty of Demario Douglas with all the iterations of the Jets, bringbacks and what have you. So the other reason I didn't take Jalen Noel there because he was the top guy is I've been getting him to fall to the 18th lately. I don't know if you've noticed this, but he's just like available, and so it's not every room. There are some rooms where he still goes near his ADP, but I've just been able to push him to the 18th. And since I already have such a big bag, that's one where I'm like, let me see how much I can get away with and push him a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way where it's like, okay, I got to chill out a little bit at the prices I was taking him because people do not want him for whatever reason. Let's do a quick recap of the team so far before these final picks. 2-5-6-2, Fields and an unstacked Jordan Love, Barkley, Chuba, RJ Harvey, Montgomery, and Tank, our strong running back room. Ladd, Garrett Wilson, Pickens, Pittman, Burden, and Wan'Dale, and then Ferguson and Ertz here. So in pretty good shape here with 3 more picks to go.
Yeah, I would expect that we're going to end up with at least a third tight end and at least another receiver. So yeah, we can go ahead and do Jalen Noel now because I think the tight ends that we're going to want will all be available later. So
yep. How have you been? We see Anthony Richardson go off the board. We have Pittman. You see Daniel Jones start to sneak into the sidekick recommendations. How do you think about that dynamic as far as, do you force a stack with Jordan Love? Do you try to get a third quarterback with Pittman? Where are you at there?
Yeah, on my other monitor right now, the rankings chat is talking about how we need to adjust the probabilities of Anthony Richardson versus Daniel Jones playing this season. Now that Richardson's healthy, it seems like they're pretty close to a coin flip right now for who's going to win the starting job in week 1. So I think we're going to lean back to Richardson, and I believe we're going to be running new sims in just a minute here as I'm trying to read out of the corner of my eye. So I think I want to IKB off of Daniel Jones in this, just because I don't know yet where he would come out after we run the new sims with these updated probabilities of those two playing. So that's one where I'm comfortable just saying, you know what, I think we're good here on quarterback with Herbert and Love. We didn't get our third guy that we wanted, and that's okay. Sometimes you're not going to end up with a third quarterback. But here, there's a lot of options that I really like.
Yes. So we're about to pick in the 17th, 2-5-7-2. Sidekick likes a tight end. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we'll go ahead and do Freiermuth. I don't think he's going to totally get phased out. I mean, you can just get him in the 18th, like pretty much every draft now.
Yeah.
I think he's a good value in the 18th. I don't think he's gonna. His volume's going to be impacted by them having Jonnu Smith, but I think he's a pretty reasonable pick in the 18th round. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see both Jonnu and Freiermuth involved. And so given that we kind of punted tight end here and our first one's Jake Ferguson and we have Zach Ertz, I wouldn't be surprised if we get a fourth tight end here, honestly. Because we started so heavy out the gate with wide receiver and running back.
We did forget about our favorite 18th round selection, Josh Reynolds, too. So, I mean, that is...
Thank you, Sidekick, for reminding us.
I know. Well, I think I've done this now a couple times. I forget if it was the draft I did with Ron Stewart, where I completely forgot about his 18th round selection, and the Sidekick reminded us here.
Yeah, no, Reynolds is definitely a good one here. There basically, I think that if you did this draft 100 times, you'd see Josh Reynolds at the top sometimes, you'd see Tyler Shuck at the top sometimes. This is after we get our Daniel Jones sim update in. And I bet you'd see some Harold Fannin. I wouldn't be at all surprised to get some Harold Fannin. The Harold Fannin drum beat is here. I don't know if you've been seeing this, Pete.
I missed this. I've been drafting him without hearing the drum beat, so I'm scared to hear what the drum beat is.
Oh, the drum beat is he's playing multiple positions. They're putting a lot on his plate, but he's progressing really well. It sounds like he is their slot receiver. He is their slot receiver and their, extra tight end and 12 personnel. Like he's going to be on the field a lot. And they're saying he's breaking the rule for oftentimes you don't see rookie tight ends be able to contribute because it's so much to learn. And they're saying not only is he breaking that rule, we're giving him more to learn than your average rookie tight end because he's playing all these positions. And so to me, I'm going to have a dangerous amount of Harold Fannin. You can follow me at your own risk, but I'm going to have a lot.
Yes. It is. It's a very fun click, especially how free he is and just the perceived, no one likes the Browns in general, much less the number 2 tight end on the Browns. So I don't even envision him getting steamed. It would have to take a lot for him to have like a higher draft clip. But we got to land the plane with a green check mark, Josh Reynolds. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Got to do it.
All right. Got to do it. Here's the team: 2-5-8-3. Justin Fields and Jordan Love, Barkley, Chuba, RJ Harvey, Montgomery, and Tank, Ladd, Garrett Wilson, George Pickens, Pittman, Burden, Wan'Dale Robinson, Knoll, Reynolds, Ferguson, Ertz, and Freiermuth. And I think going back to that conversation at the top about leaning into winning the flex, rushing to win the flex with the best players, one thing that makes sense to me and why the Sims are pushing in that direction is that I just don't feel like you get punished as much at wide receiver in this current ADP landscape, and the way we're able to rip off Pittman, Burden, Wan'Dale, Knoll, Reynolds, a nice mix of correlation, young breakouts, projectable volume with Robinson and Pittman. Like it seems like you can kind of have your cake and eat it too that way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just there's a big pocket of receivers that go late in drafts that we think are really mispriced, and it's more a function of like that the market probably should have a bunch of these receivers in the middle rounds. Like if you scroll up to like rounds kind of 13 through 9.
Yeah.
So So round 9 is kind of where you start hitting this cliff of like the exciting guys go away. But then look at what you have. You have Marvin Mims, Christian Kirk, Kyle Williams, Hollywood Brown, QJ, Xavier Legette, Cedric Tillman, like this like big chasm of nothing, where I would argue that a lot of these receivers are just going here because someone is like, oh my God, I need a receiver. When the difference between these guys and Romeo Doubs, Josh Palmer, Wan'Dale Robinson, Demario Douglas is just not very much at all. And so it's just that the market is treating receiver weirdly here. And it just feels uncomfy to have no receivers for like a 4-round stretch. And so you end up with this dynamic where it's like, it's actually best to use those rounds as a spot to come up for air, grab your quarterbacks, grab maybe some tight ends. There's a couple running back targets that we like in there. But it's basically, I mean, if you want to call it a dead zone, which I talked about how much I hate like painting with a broad brush, but that's the wide receiver dead zone of like, beware of rounds 11 through 14 at the wide receiver position.
Yep. And then kind of the final thing in hindsight, or just kind of thinking through the Jordan Love selection. Obviously, in a perfect world, it's Herbert or Dak, but it wasn't a perfect world, and other drafters took them. And there weren't specific player targets on the Packers that made sense without really stretching or sacrificing, projectable points. Like, we're not taking Savion Williams right now just to have a stacking partner. So what's the final thought on, unstacked Jordan Love, making this team as good as it can be and still giving it a chance to win in, a 539 seat final?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, another thing that we noticed with the Sims, and a lot of this came from like the adding a third quarterback and sometimes even an unstacked third quarterback, is there are way more outcomes than you would feel comfortable with when your team makes it to the Best Ball Mania finals and you put up sub 10 points at quarterback, either because of injuries or because you had one injury and one guy busted, right? And so even though we have an unstacked quarterback, the reason that we had to take him there is because the other quarterbacks are going off the board. So we are getting to the end of that tier. We needed to pick someone. He had backstack ability with a player that we like in Romeo Doubs. And Doubs didn't make it to us because we were taking a player that we thought was a better value there at Tank Bigsby. We're just not throwing the baby out with the bathwater and saying, I can't draft the best player. I have to draft a correlated player. The nice thing about the Sims is they help us weigh how much that correlation is worth. So, even just a couple weeks ago where we thought Tank Bigsby was a much more fragile bet before we got all this camp news of, hey, he's pretty clearly like the guy that's leading the team in carries right now is what it looks like. I bet we would have seen Doubs there over Bigsby. But because we have this new information, it's like, yeah, this guy's not priced correctly, so go ahead and take him. And so I think that's just part of being flexible and taking the lessons from the Sims and not trying to jam the square peg in the round hole because of correlation and it makes you feel comfier. So yeah, I'm perfectly happy with having unstacked Jordan Love. Some of your teams, they're just not going to all fall perfectly where you get them to look nice and pretty on paper, but the math still says this works out pretty good.
And I think that's a really good point about the tank thing, and also kind of like from a CLV angle, right? Like Romeo Doubs' ADP isn't going anywhere. Like there's nothing that is going to push Romeo Doubs up 3 rounds, overnight or because he has a good preseason or whatever. Whereas Tank Bigsby, I saw him go at 110 in one of my drafts earlier this morning. Like if this drumbeat continues, he is going to move up 3-4 rounds from here. So taking advantage of every opportunity you can get him a player on the rise at a cheap price, I think makes a ton of sense. So I'm glad we held firm and grabbed him there. All right. Sackreligious, it was awesome drafting with you. Let the people know if they want to get that leg up sidekick tool that they saw on screen here, where they can do that.
Yeah, just head over to legendaryupside.com. We've got the sidekick available there. If you do subscribe to the sidekick, we've got a special offer right now where you can get a bonus ticket in the DraftKings Millionaire Maker. You just have to sign up to the sidekick and you'll go ahead and get that bonus ticket. We've also got plenty of articles and rankings and things like that over at Legendary Upside. If you are not in the market for the sidekick, there's plenty of other content over there. Lots of really good articles. I honestly, the Matt Irby articles from this summer have been really good. Pat's Legendary Upside article, where he travels to the future and looks at all the outcomes for the running backs that could potentially have legendary upside. I'm really looking forward to that one this year. There's some really fun guys on the list, so I'm pretty excited for that one. But yep, just check it out at legendaryupside.com.
Awesome. Yeah, and you guys can always, if for some reason you're familiar with this channel, but not my live stream channel, I do draft with Pat Crane every Monday on Best Ball Breakfast, and we use the sidekick there as well. Highly recommend checking that out, and check out all the evergreen videos here on the channel, including the Eliminator contest, which Leg Up has sims for as well, if you enjoyed that video and have been drafting in the contest. And otherwise, we will see you guys next time on the Deposit Kingdom. Peace.